Imagine waking up hungry. Not the kind of hungry where you skip breakfast and feel slightly irritated by noon. The kind of hungry where your body has started consuming itself. Where your thoughts narrow to a single point. Where the difference between finding food today and not finding food today is the difference between waking up tomorrow and not waking up at all. This was normal. For hundreds of thousands of years, this was the baseline human experience. No refrigerators, no grocery stores, no farms, no guarantee that the effort you spent searching would result in anything you could eat. And yet, somehow, across ice ages and droughts and volcanic winters and mass animal die-offs, our ancestors kept going. Not because they were superhuman, because they were resourceful in ways we've almost entirely forgotten. The first thing you need to understand is that ancient humans didn't survive without food. They survived by redefining what food was. To modern eyes, a forest is scenery. Trees, bushes, dirt, insects. To a hunter-gatherer 50,000 years ago, that same forest was a supermarket. Every plant carried information. That root? Poisonous raw, but edible if you roast it for 3 hours. Those berries? Safe in autumn, toxic in spring. That bark? Chew the inner layer when everything else fails. It won't fill you up, but it will keep you alive another day. This knowledge wasn't instinct, it was curriculum. Passed down through generations, tested through trial and error, paid for in deaths that taught the survivors what to avoid. A child growing up in a prehistoric tribe didn't learn to read. They learned to read the landscape. Which tracks meant food was nearby? Which plants meant water was close? Which signs meant danger? Get it right and you eat. Get it wrong and you become a lesson for the next generation. Here's something that doesn't get enough attention. The image of ancient humans as pure meat-eaters dragging mammoth legs back to caves is incomplete. The archaeological evidence tells a different story. They ate everything. Insects, grubs, larvae dug from rotting wood, bird eggs stolen from nests, shellfish pried from rocks along coastlines, bone marrow cracked from carcasses that predators had already abandoned, tubers pulled from frozen ground, pine bark stripped and chewed for whatever nutrients it contained. Archaeological sites from South Africa show that during harsh periods, humans dramatically expanded their diets. When the usual food sources disappeared, they didn't sit down and starve. They experimented. They learned to process plants that would normally be toxic, soaking them, grinding them, heating them until the poison broke down and what remained was calories. This wasn't desperation. This was intelligence. The ability to look at something inedible and figure out how to make it edible. That's not instinct. That's engineering. But finding food was only half the problem. Keeping it was the other half. When you don't know when your next meal is coming, you don't waste what you have. Ancient humans developed preservation techniques that we still use today, even if we've forgotten where they came from. Smoking meat over fires, drying it in the sun, storing it in cold places where bacteria couldn't reach, burying it in snow or submerging it in cold streams. These weren't sophisticated technologies. They were practical solutions to a simple problem. How do you make today's kill feed you next week? Evidence from Ice Age sites in Ukraine and Russia shows that humans built storage pits near their shelters. They planned. They accumulated. They thought ahead in ways that required abstract reasoning about a future that hadn't happened yet. That's not primitive. That's strategic. And then there's the strategy that made all of this possible. The one that shows up in every survival story across every era of human history. They stayed together. A single human trying to survive alone in a prehistoric landscape was vulnerable, slow compared to predators, weak compared to large prey, unable to watch in all directions at once, unable to hunt effectively without help. A group of humans was something else entirely. They could coordinate. They could drive animals toward waiting hunters. They could share information about where food had been found. They could watch each other's children while others searched. They could pool resources during bad times so that no single family starved while others had excess. There's evidence from cave sites across Europe that humans returned to the same locations repeatedly over thousands of years. Not because the caves were comfortable, because they were defensible, central, and known. A place where groups could reconvene, where knowledge could be shared, where the collective memory of the tribe was stronger than any individual's experience. Survival wasn't a solo project. It was a group assignment. Here's the part of this story that I find most remarkable. The humans who survived periods of extreme scarcity didn't have any concept of why things had gotten bad. They didn't understand climate cycles, or ecological collapse, or volcanic winters. They just knew that the food they used to find wasn't there anymore, that the animals had moved, that the plants weren't growing where they used to grow. And they kept going anyway. They moved when they had to. They ate what was available, not what they preferred. They shared what they had. They learned new techniques when old ones stopped working. They taught their children everything they knew, and their children added to that knowledge and passed it on. Not because they understood the science of what was happening, because keeping going is what living things do when they still have the option. Every person alive today is descended from those survivors. Not people who happen to be alive, people who actively made it through conditions that should have been unsurvivable. That inheritance is not a small thing. The next time you open a refrigerator, remember, you didn't invent survival, you inherited it from ordinary people who did ordinary things in extraordinarily difficult circumstances. That's the whole story, and it's the reason you exist.